on these bills as we're moving forward. So we're going to pivot back to the beginning of our agenda, Senate Bill 294 relating to pre-adoption training formats. This is authored by Senator Johnson and Representative Snodgrass. So, Senator Johnson? That's okay. Just remind folks we are, I think we're on Wisconsin Eye. Okay, so make sure that you're using your mics. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you to the Senate Committee on Human Services, Children and Families. It is my honor to be here with you this afternoon offering testimony on SB 294 AB 197 related to pre-adoption training formats. Before I get into testimony, I want to first express my gratitude to Senator Andre Jacques for scheduling this bill and then rescheduling it after his long battle with COVID-19. I join others in this room who continue to wish the Senator a full recovery. I also want to thank my neighboring Republican legislative colleagues, Senator Roth and Representative Tussler, for joining me as leads on the Republican side of this important bill. And of course, Senator Johnson here to my right. This proposed legislation came about in what I believe is the best way bills become a reality, from a genuine need brought forth by a constituent. Shortly after I was sworn in, I was talking with a constituent who was in the process of becoming eligible to be an adoptive parent. If you recall, January was a time when COVID-19 vaccinations were not yet widely available, and most of the world had shifted to virtual options for getting things done, whether that be work, meetings, events, or even socializing with friends. Wendy, who you will hear from later, expressed to me that they were almost finished with the state-required pre-adoption classwork, but that 6 of the 25 hours of mandated training required they be in person. Wendy is immunocompromised, and exposure to COVID-19 would have placed them at greater risk than others, and that was of concern. Like Wendy, many individuals desiring to open their homes and hearts to adoption held concerns about COVID-19 and therefore expressed delays because of the mandated in-person instruction requirement. According to the State Department of Children and Families, adoption finalizations were delayed throughout COVID-19 pandemic, many specifically due to the in-person training requirements. In July 2020, this barrier impacted approximately 100 public adoption families and as many as 200 children awaiting adoption finalization. I know you will learn more about that from DCF in a moment. While Wendy's barrier to accessible participation was health-related, for many prospective adoptive families, the in-person requirement is also a challenge for those whose location or jobs limit their flexibility to travel. The state-mandated in-person instruction often means traveling, and in many cases, means an individual must take time off from work in order to travel often significant distances. Travel time, lack of flexibility, and related expenses can and do present an additional barrier to prospective parents who have much love and care to offer and are anxious to provide a forever home to waiting children as quickly as possible. Fortunately, this is one of the few challenges easily solved by those like you and me who are in positions to update state law to accommodate changing times. The straightforward bill requires a simple change to allow prospective parents to still meet pre-adoptive preparation training requirements by allowing for the 6 hours of training previously designated in person to have the option to be delivered face-to-face over an interactive virtual platform. With this change, training providers will be allowed to conduct training that is still interactive while following COVID-19 safety guidelines to the benefit of trainers and adoptive families alike. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Senator Johnson?
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the committee members for hearing this and also to say how happy I am to hear Senator Jacques' voice. He sounds awesome. I'm happy to know that you're getting better and that you'll be able to join us back here soon. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of this very important proposal, SB 294, which allows adoptive parents to complete in-person training requirements through a live video conference. The risk of exposure to COVID-19 has delayed many adoptions in Wisconsin due to in-person training requirements. Under this bill, pre-adoptive parents will still receive the same interactive training via a virtual platform as they would in person. SB 294 does not eliminate in-person training. Instead, it brings pre-adoption training in line with foster care training requirements, which have the flexibility to conduct live interactive virtual trainings. Moreover, both virtual and in-person trainings may be offered once the concerns surrounding COVID-19's pandemic have been mitigated. While crafting this bill, both the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families and the Wisconsin Association of Children and Families agencies were consulted, and both agencies are in support of this legislation. We all want to see Wisconsin children find their forever home, but parents shouldn't have to choose between their health and taking a 6-hour in-person training in order to achieve this. This bill is a common sense solution that will allow children and families to reach adoption finalization more quickly without having to take unnecessary risk. Once again, thank you to the committee members for your consideration of this very important piece of legislation, and thank you to my co-author, Representative Snodgrass, for her hard work on this bipartisan legislation.
Thank you both very much. It was interesting that the fiscal estimate says that fiscal effects of this bill may lead to a temporary reduction in state-paid training costs incurred. So it's actually their interpretation would save money. Any questions from the committee for the authors? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both very much for your testimony today. And we do have, I do believe, possibly online, we have Wendy Bohm and Ann Munster that we're going to be calling in. Wendy or Ann, are you there?
Yes, this is Wendy. I'm here.
Please go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. And thank you to Chairman Jacques and the members of the committee for allowing me to testify on behalf of SB 294 related to pre-adoption training formats. I'm grateful you're allowing virtual testimony in part because of my health, but also because Thursdays are actually the day I have a regularly scheduled call with a teenage girl I'm in the process of adopting, and being able to participate from Appleton ensures I'll continue to be a dependable person in the life of a child who needs stability and routine. To put her life in a little more perspective, in less than 10 years, she has been shuffled through more than 20 placements. Her social worker and support team are all in agreement that my home seems to be a perfect fit for her and that she is ready and eager to be adopted. Statistically, because she is a teen, she is more likely to age out of the system than be adopted by a loving caregiver. Every time we speak, we agree that we both hope the process moves as quickly as possible. I contacted Representative Snodgrass early in my adoption process out of frustration. After orientation with Lutheran Social Services, filling out what seemed like endless amounts of paperwork and taking hours of pre-adoptive training, I was told to sign up for my in-person training as soon as possible because, as was described to me, the required in-person training ran out of seats fast. I was also told that for months there had been a bottleneck of people who were waiting on the training to finish their home studies because of the confusion and delays of the early pandemic. Because of Wisconsin's high number of COVID cases and per my doctor's recommendations due to asthma, I shuffled my in-person training reservation around for months because the COVID caseload was just too high to risk such a long in-person training class. The reality is that this in-person requirement slows training scheduling and is burdensome. The home study process has other in-person components that make more sense to be in person and are less of a burden to families. The travel required alone makes scheduling tricky. For example, for a married couple with children, both parents have to take the in-person 6-hour training. Because there are limited seats and limited locations for the class, the couple might have to make the decision to either have both parents drive from Appleton to Madison to take the same class, which would necessitate finding someone willing to watch their children for 10 or more hours, 4 hours of driving, and possibly a missed workday for both parents. Or it could necessitate the parents take the class on separate days, which could slow down the process by a week or more. Waiting for the training to be offered in Appleton could slow the process down by months. In my training class, I met one couple who had to take the trainings out of order because of an emergency placement that had been referred to them. Because of the need and timing of the classes offered, they were scheduled to meet the child the day after their in-person training, which was supposed to be the first class of the training series. In order to better serve both the families who want to adopt and the children in care, we need to build more flexibility into the system so that a 6-hour training doesn't completely stall an intricate and complex process that has such a profound effect on the lives of our most vulnerable children. Thank you for your time and consideration and your work in helping Wisconsin's children.
Thank you, Wendy. And I wanted to point out to committee members, we do have your written testimony here that's been handed out to all the committee members. And obviously, as Representative Snodgrass mentioned, this is the way that good legislation can move forward. Any questions by committee members for Wendy? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, for bringing this forward, and good luck as you move forward with that adoption. Do we have? You're welcome. Do we have Ann Munster online? Also,
yes, I am. I am here, Senator Ballweg.
Please go ahead, Ann. We also have
Thank
your
you.
testimony here too.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, Chairperson Jacques, Co-Chair Ballweg, and members of the Senate Committee on Human Services, Children, and Families. As you've heard, my name is Ann Minster, and I appreciate the opportunity to lend my voice in support of SB 294 AB 197, which would allow the previously required hours of in-person pre-adoption training to be met through a face-to-face interactive virtual platform. As an adoptive parent myself, I want to share the personal experience which motivated me to speak with you today. I am 68 years old, and my husband and I became parents through the adoption of 2 sons. Our sons, Mitchell and Andrew, were born in 1990 and 1993, so they are now grown men. Even so, my memories of the process may serve to strengthen your support of SB 294 AB 197. Back then, there was no pandemic happening, but there also were no virtual options available for the training and meetings required. Living in Appleton, however, we did have short drives to the meetings required, and most were in the evening, so they didn't conflict with our work schedules. There was a couple who lived in the rural area of Cato in our group, and meetings held in the winter did make for some hazardous driving for them. However, in our own case, just before Andrew's adoption was final, we ran into a situation where even minimal travel time became a problem. The termination of parental rights hearing was approaching, and we needed to meet with our social worker in the Lutheran Social Services office one last time. I was a speech and language pathologist with a start time with students of 8:30 a.m. Our social worker made an accommodation for me by scheduling our meeting for 7:30 a.m. Even so, I was concerned that I might return to school slightly after 8:30 a.m. because of the travel time between the LSS office and my school. I approached my principal about the situation. Now, mind you, I had not needed to use any sick leave for doctor appointments for a pregnancy, as my colleagues had. But when I told him I might need to cancel my 8:30 a.m. student, but would reschedule the student to meet with him during my scheduled prep time, he told me I would need to use a half day of sick leave. I felt personally humiliated to think that there was so little regard for my needs as a prospective adoptive parent. If there had been a virtual option for meeting face-to-face 28 years ago, it would have made my humiliation and work disruption unnecessary, as the travel time would have been eliminated. Today, there are virtual options available for meeting the training requirements. It simply makes sense that we would amend our current law to make it possible. Believe me, and in the case of Wendy's story, becoming an adoptive parent is challenging. Let's alleviate challenges where we can. Please support SB 294, AB 197. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. And I'm happy to hear that that process in the end did work for you, and you were able to raise those two young people. So congratulations, and thank you for testifying today.
Thank you.
So we do have on Senate Bill 294, Department of Children and Families testifying. We have Amanda Merkwall and Wendy Henderson. And committee members should have their prepared testimony at your desks. Please proceed, ladies. Thank you for being here.
It is not. There we go. Okay.
You're on.
Good afternoon, Chair Jacques, Vice Chair Ballweg, and members of the Senate Committee on Human Services, Children, and Families. My name is Amanda Merkway. I am the legislative advisor for DCF, and I am joined by Wendy Henderson, who is the administrator for our Division of Safety and Permanence within DCF, so essentially the child welfare director for the state of Wisconsin. We are excited to be here today to testify in support of SB 294. DCF is committed to the goal that all Wisconsin children and youth are safe and loved members of thriving families and communities. And as the child welfare system seeks permanency for children and young people, whether that be through reunification or adoption or guardianship, that permanency is important. And in thinking about the hurdle that is this 6-hour in-person requirement, it is just so kind of a common sense, really easy, quick fix that can have a really tremendous impact. In our testimony, I've included data from 2020 on adoption finalization in Wisconsin among both public adoptions and private adoptions, in addition to international adoptions. Under current law, as has been mentioned, this 6-hour training, I think our thought was that the premise is to be an interactive kind of experience where there can be feedback given and in real time, and a prospective adoptive parent is able to be present with the instructor and other folks in a particular class. I think the requirement to physically be in person, particularly as everybody's gotten really great at using Zoom, though I don't think I've been in a Zoom meeting yet where someone doesn't need to be unmuted. But I think it's absolutely the time to provide this flexibility in the statute, because over the course of the pandemic, we absolutely did have a backlog and had to kind of pivot and figure out how to get to adoption finalization when there were so many different places that were closed due to COVID-19 mitigation and other barriers. And while there were at one point approximately 100 public adoption families awaiting adoption finalization, we ended up being able to work through those in partnership with the Wisconsin Child Welfare Professional Development System, or WCW PDS, that did use wait lists and kind of prioritizing who are the folks that the only piece of their training left was that 6 hours of in-person. But it was still a tremendous challenge. And we issued guidance throughout the pandemic about, are there ways that workers can go into someone's home or meet on in a public place that maybe it was outside where everybody could be safe, but they could technically meet the spirit of that in-person requirement. So very excited that kind of at the same time that Representative Snodgrass mentioned the issue facing her constituent, we had also gotten a lot of outreach from adoption agencies and folks that were facing the same challenges and didn't think that these workarounds were really sustainable long term, particularly in light of kind of where these trainings are held, even outside of the constraints of the pandemic. So typically, the Wisconsin Child Welfare Professional Development System holds in-person trainings in Milwaukee, Kenosha, Madison, Appleton, Wausau, and Eau Claire. So even once we can get past the challenges of COVID-19, this really small technical change proposed in this bill will have a tremendous impact on families that face additional barriers to physically being in person, particularly those that live in rural areas where it can be challenging to find placement resources. So adoption agencies that we have been in contact with and the Wisconsin Child Welfare Professional Development System are also in support of this change and the added flexibility in training modality. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So, Wendy or Amanda, thank you both for being here and for what you do to help move this kind of process along. Is this were there similar barriers in other states? Is this something that was available for other states to do during COVID, or do you see a lot of states having to go through some kind of statutory change?
So what I would say about that is that, like every other state during COVID, we just took such a deep dive into the statutes to see what can we do to keep the system moving. And every state has its own, child welfare is one of these weird areas where there's a big federal landscape, but there's a very significant state landscape. So every state found these little technical barriers. It wasn't necessarily this, but every state has some cleanup now that they've noticed. To me, the thing that I think is the most important about this bill and what I'm so excited about is that, we're looking for all kinds of ways to try to make sure that kids can get through to adoption finalization. And a lot of focus has been on the TPR side of things. But here's a situation where we're talking about post-TPR, you've got families that are ready to adopt, and they may not have a local training, and local may be 3 hours away, and that local training may not be for 2 months. Well, that just seems like something that we should be able to fix. And so that part, from a TPR to adoption timeliness piece, and I think that that's what, the brave people who testified earlier really highlighted for us, is that we just need to get out of our own way. I think when this was written, people wanted to be interactive, right? They wanted somebody to be really engaged in the training. Well, we know how to do that virtually now.
Very good. Thank you. Other questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony today. I'll turn to the clerk. Is there anyone that registered not speaking one way or the other, or?
We had two folks.
Okay, we have Jody Black from Children's Wisconsin registering in favor but not speaking. And we also have Emily Coddington from Madison WAFCA registering in favor but not speaking. So thank you very much. All right, we will move on then to testimony for the bills that Senator Jacques testified on earlier. So first would be Senate Bill 395. And calling up first is Sally Flashberger and Tammy Jackson, Living Well Grant, and I was going to say, I got to figure out